My Uncle David called me out of nowhere about 2 years ago. He's 71, been retired for 6 years, and I figured he was calling to complain about his knees or ask me how to fix something on his phone. Instead, he opens with, "Hey, I just hit a new high on my net worth." And I literally pulled the car over. I said, "David, you haven't worked in 6 years. How is that even possible?" And he laughed at me. Like, genuinely laughed. Because to him, at this point, it was obvious. So I did what any curious person would do. I started asking around. I talked to other retirees in his circle. I dug into financial research. I read case studies. And what I found genuinely rattled my entire understanding of money, work, and retirement. Because it turns out, my Uncle David is not some rare exception. There are people all across this country who walk away from their careers, never collect another paycheck, and somehow end up wealthier with every passing year. Now I know that sounds like the setup to a scam. Trust me, I had that same reaction. But this isn't about some magic investment trick or a viral get-rich-quick scheme. There are actual, concrete, logical reasons why this happens. And once you understand them, they're going to change the way you think about your own financial future entirely. So let's get into it. Here are the real reasons why some people genuinely get richer after they stop working. Reason number 1. The way you get taxed completely transforms. When you're working, the government is essentially your business partner. A silent one who contributes nothing but takes a cut of everything. You've got federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security withholding, Medicare taxes, and depending on your situation, possibly more on top of that. By the time your paycheck actually lands in your account, you might have lost anywhere from 30 to 50 cents of every dollar you earned. It's one of the most painful parts of working that people just accept and stop thinking about. But then you retire, and the math completely flips. Here's a real-world example. Say you were earning $100,000 a year at your job. After all the taxes and withholdings, maybe you were actually taking home somewhere around $65,000 to $70,000. That's what you had to actually live on. Now let's say in retirement, you're drawing $60,000 a year from a combination of Social Security and your retirement accounts. You'd think, well, that's less income, so obviously I have less money. But here's where it gets interesting. Let's say half of that, $30,000, comes from Social Security. The IRS generally only taxes about 50% of your Social Security benefit, so only $15,000 of that actually counts as taxable income. Then you add your $30,000 IRA withdrawal. That puts you at $45,000 in taxable income before deductions. And if you're over 65, your standard deduction is roughly $17,000. So you're now only paying taxes on about $28,000, even though you spent $60,000 living your life. You just went from being taxed on $100,000 to being taxed on $28,000. That is not a small difference. That is a completely different financial reality. Throw in some Roth withdrawals, which are entirely tax-free, and you could potentially reduce that taxable number even further. Some retirees hit years where they pay almost nothing in federal income tax while spending comfortably. Getting older comes with a lot of downsides. But paying a fraction of the taxes you used to is one heck of a silver lining. Reason number 2. Your monthly expenses don't just drop. They collapse. Here's a list of things you're probably spending money on right now that will either shrink dramatically or disappear entirely by the time you retire. Your commute, gas, tolls, parking, car wear and tear, or public transit costs. Gone. Your work wardrobe, dry cleaning, dress shoes, suits, the whole performance of looking professional every single day. Gone. Lunches, coffee runs, the vending machine at 3 p.m. when the meeting goes long. Gone. But those are just the surface level cuts. The bigger ones run deeper. Your mortgage. If you've been homeowner for 30 years, that debt is likely paid off before retirement even starts. Your kids. College tuitions, school activities, car insurance for teenagers, all the financial chaos that comes with raising human beings. Done. Your convenience spending. This is the one nobody talks about enough. When you're working full-time, you are chronically short on one resource, and that's time. So you compensate by spending money to buy it back. Takeout instead of cooking. A lawn service because you don't have 2 free hours on Saturday. A cleaning company because the weekend is the only time you could do it yourself and you'd rather not. Expensive grocery delivery because driving to the store feels impossible. But retirement gives you something working never could. Unlimited time. Suddenly you're cooking real meals at home, you're doing your own yard work, you're running your own errands, you're handling your own repairs. None of that is glamorous. But when you actually tally up how much convenience spending costs a working person per year, it's often in the thousands. And in retirement, that entire category basically disappears from your budget. The result is that many retirees find themselves living just as well, sometimes better, than they did while working, but on significantly less money. And when your expenses drop below what your income sources provide, the gap between the two starts building your wealth quietly in the background. Reason number 3. Compound interest stops being a joke and starts being a monster. If you've been saving for retirement for a long time, you probably remember the early years feeling kind of underwhelming. You'd check your account after a year of contributions and think, I put in $5,000 and my portfolio grew by $400. Cool, I guess. It feels slow, almost pointless. A lot of people give up during this phase because the reward doesn't feel proportional to the effort. Here's what they don't understand. Compound interest is not a straight line. It's a curve, and that curve gets dramatically steeper the longer it runs. Think of it this way. The first decade of saving, you're mostly just accumulating a base. The second decade, the growth starts getting noticeable. But the third and fourth decade? That's when things get almost unbelievable. I've seen real portfolio breakdowns where someone invested a total of maybe $300,000 of their own money across 35 years of working. And by retirement, that portfolio was sitting at over $1 million. The extra $700,000 didn't come from extra paychecks. It came from their money earning money, which then earned more money, which then earned even more. And here's the part that blows people's minds. That process doesn't stop on your last day of work. As long as you're withdrawing money at a responsible rate, which most financial planners suggest somewhere around 3 to 4% annually, the portion of your portfolio that remains invested keeps compounding. So even while you're pulling money out every month to cover your living expenses, the overall value of your portfolio can still be growing. You're taking golden eggs out of the nest, and the nest keeps making more. Some retirees in their early 70s find themselves with more money than they had the day they retired, purely because the math of compounding keeps working in their favor. That's not an accident. That's decades of patience finally doing what it was always going to do. Reason number 4. Social Security is more valuable than you've been told. Look, I know Social Security has become everyone's punching bag. It's going broke. My generation will never see it. The whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. I've heard all of it. And while there are legitimate questions about its long-term funding, here's what's actually true right now. It's paying out. Every month. To tens of millions of people. The average Social Security check today runs somewhere around $1,800 per month. For a married couple, you're likely looking at closer to $3,000 per month combined. That's $36,000 a year coming in without touching your investments at all. Now think about what that means strategically. If Social Security is already covering your core living expenses, your groceries, your utilities, your insurance, your basic lifestyle, then your retirement accounts aren't being depleted. They're sitting there, compounding, growing, doing their thing undisturbed. Social Security is essentially acting as a protective wall around your investment portfolio, keeping you from having to make large withdrawals. And unlike most income sources, Social Security comes with built-in inflation protection. When the cost of living rises, your benefit rises with it. That's an automatic feature most investment products can't replicate. So while everyone's busy criticizing it, quietly smart retirees are using it as the foundation of a financial strategy that lets their investments keep growing for years after they've stopped working. Reason number 5. Medicare changes the entire healthcare equation. Healthcare is one of the biggest fears people have about retiring early. And honestly, it's a legitimate fear, because the cost of private health insurance for someone in their early 60s is genuinely brutal. Depending on where you live and your health history, A couple can easily be looking at $1,500 to $2,500 every single month just to stay insured before Medicare kicks in. I talked to a couple in their late 60s who told me the 3 years between when they retired at 62 and when they hit 65 and became Medicare eligible were the hardest years financially. Not because they ran out of money, but because that health insurance bill was enormous. It dominated their budget. It was the thing they didn't fully anticipate. But then 65 arrived. Medicare kicked in. Their monthly healthcare costs dropped from somewhere around $2,000 a month down to roughly $400 with a supplemental plan. That's $1,600 a month back in their hands. $19,200 a year that used to go to an insurance company and now either stays in their account or goes back into their investments. For a lot of retirees, the moment Medicare starts is the moment their retirement math really starts working in their favor. It's one of the most significant monthly expense reductions that happens at a completely predictable and guaranteed date. It's practically a financial event you can calendar. Reason number 6. Downsizing converts decades of equity into liquid wealth. Picture the house you might own after 30 or 35 years. You raised a family there. You paid off the mortgage. And somewhere along the way, the value of that property quietly doubled or tripled. It's now one of the most valuable assets you own, but it's also expensive to maintain, has more rooms than you need, and costs you more in property taxes and utilities than a smaller place ever would. So what happens when you sell it? Let's say you sell for $500,000 and buy a smaller home or condo for $250,000. You've just converted $250,000 of locked-up equity into cash that can go straight into your investment portfolio. And here's the part the IRS won't ruin for you. Thanks to the capital gains exclusion on primary residences, up to $500,000 in gains for married couples is completely tax-free. This is one of the most generous tax benefits in the entire tax code, and it's sitting right there for homeowners who've lived in their home for at least 2 of the past 5 years. Beyond the lump sum, your ongoing costs drop too. Lower property taxes, lower utility bills, less maintenance, lower insurance premiums. You've not only added to your liquid net worth, you've also cut your monthly expenses, which frees up even more money to stay invested. Not every retiree wants to leave the family home. That's completely understandable. But for those who are willing, downsizing can be one of the single most powerful wealth accelerators available in retirement. Reason number 7. Retirement income can come from doing exactly what you love. Here's something interesting that happens to a lot of retirees. They retire from their careers, take a few months to decompress, and then slowly start realizing they actually want to do something. Not out of financial desperation, out of boredom, purpose, or just the simple desire to stay engaged with the world. So they start doing things. Maybe they consult part-time in the industry they spent 35 years in and get paid very well for a few hours a week. Maybe they turn a hobby, woodworking, photography, gardening, cooking, into a small business that generates a few hundred to a few $1,000s a month. Maybe they teach, coach, write, or create content online around something they genuinely care about. The difference between this income and the income from their working years is enormous. No commute. No boss. No performance reviews. No mandatory 9 to 5 structure. They work when they want, on what they want, for who they want. And crucially, because their retirement savings and Social Security are already covering their actual living expenses, none of this extra money has to go toward bills. It's surplus. It goes directly into savings or investments, compounding on top of everything else that's already growing. Every dollar of optional income earned in retirement is a dollar that doesn't need to come from a withdrawal, which means the investment portfolio stays larger and stays growing longer. Reason number 8. Windfalls and inheritances tend to arrive later in life. This one is harder to plan around, but statistically, it's real. Most people inherit money, if they inherit it at all, during their 60s or 70s. That's when parents tend to pass, and when estates get settled. Depending on the family situation, that inheritance could be modest or it could be significant, but either way, it's money that wasn't factored into the original retirement plan, which means it goes directly on top of an already healthy financial picture. Beyond inheritances, retirees sometimes experience other kinds of financial windfalls. A piece of real estate they've held for decades finally gets sold. Old stock options or deferred compensation finally gets cashed out. An insurance settlement comes through. A small business stake gets bought out. These events don't happen on a schedule, but they tend to cluster in the later years of a long career or the early years of retirement. None of this is guaranteed. But the point is that unexpected money tends to land during retirement years, not during your 30s. And when it does, it adds to a net worth that was already moving in the right direction. Now here is the part where I need to be completely straight with you, because none of what I've said today comes without conditions. Not everyone who retires gets richer. Plenty of people retire and watch their savings decline steadily until they're genuinely worried about running out. The difference between those two outcomes almost always comes down to decisions made years before retirement ever begins. Everything in this video assumes you saved consistently during your working years. It assumes you entered retirement without carrying high-interest debt. It assumes you're spending at a sustainable rate, not burning through your portfolio in the first 5 years on vacations and renovations and gifts to adult children. It assumes you had a plan and you followed it. If you didn't save enough, if you're withdrawing too aggressively, if you're carrying debt that's still compounding against you, then retirement is going to feel like a financial treadmill, not a wealth-building phase. But here's the message I want to leave you with. For people who did the work, who saved when it wasn't easy, who invested consistently, who kept their lifestyle from inflating faster than their income, retirement is not the financial cliff they feared. It's the payoff. It's the point where everything they quietly set in motion for 3 or 4 decades finally starts delivering results they can actually feel. The money you're putting in now, the habits you're building now, the debt you're avoiding now, those aren't just responsible choices. They're the exact reasons why someone, maybe you, could be sitting at a barbecue in 30 years telling your neighbor, honestly, I'm doing better now than I ever did when I was working. And they're going to pull over their car to think about it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.